Okay, we're now recording the March 2026 meeting of the North Texas Renewable Energy Group.
And I believe I have the microphone on. Again, folks in the room and out there in virtual space, welcome to our March meeting. I've just got a few pieces of business to go through for the chapter before I turn it over to our guest speaker for the day, which is going to be really exciting. And I've been like biting my tongue with all my questions because I know he's going to answer most of them in his briefing. But again, welcome to the meeting. Some business for the chapter to get out of the way first. Let's see, there's about 3 different things I wanted to talk to. The most important is for those members in good standing, which there were 4 of you who were due this month, who I see haven't paid yet. If you want to vote in the annual elections, you need to get that membership in here. So within the next, I'll say a little over a week, because we have until the end of the month to iron this out. We will be issuing the slate of nominees for the next set of 2-year board positions. Now we have a number of offsetting positions. So yes, there will be another vote, but not for these specific positions coming up here in a year. But by the end of this month, you will see an email saying, do or don't vote for the following folks. We have only 1 open slot at this time. And I really, if anybody has even the slightest inclination, or you know somebody else that you could strong arm, or you want to pick a random person off the street that you think just is going to do this job well, an important position that we don't have a candidate for yet is the events coordinator. As a director on the board. And also then this is a position where this doesn't have to be the person who likes being in the booths or want to get out to every single event or be there themselves. Bill has even offered that they don't necessarily have to house the equipment that we use at various classes of briefings, but it is an important position. Especially, I will talk a bit about how much more important we would like to make it if we start having more of an impact and doing a little bit more on the outreach side. And we have got a couple of initiatives going on that will up the number of times we're just asked to present a speaker or the different types of events that we may be not just our standard booth setups, but co-engagement with other things that are going on that municipalities or NGOs, et cetera, are holding. So the events coordinator position is still open. I would say you have, let's just say, a week from today. So I will probably work with Eric to get the email out by next weekend. And so if anybody or you know anybody is interested in filling that position for us, like I said, it's an important one. You can, if you love being out in public and you like working with, slapping the palms there and, convincing people of, everything else they could do right in the world, it's a position for you too. But you don't have to take that approach on it. We just need somebody who works the logistics of making sure that we have a point of contact for people to reach out to and that we follow through on those commitments for public engagement. I guess without naming the full slate, I want to thank Tracy Wallace for being here today. We have at least one fantastic name that you'll be seeing on the slate. Again, this will be my last briefing as chairperson of the monthly meetings. And I want to say that, in my tenure here, so much more I wanted to see done. But then again, I'm so happy with the group of people that we're working with. And, I see this as, this was even coming into it from probably my nerdy, more engineering. I think that characterizes the majority of our people as opposed to the front end of what should be civic organization that's really trying to make these things happen in the public domain. And I think Tracy's got so much history in that we really will enjoy leaning into. Georgianne, for example, we've got the Truth About X. We're just about to launch our Truth About Solar. This is challenging people to say that any thing on anything that we publish is really not verifiable or leaning too hard into the maybes. We're really just trying to get straightforward information out there where there has just been too much hype and confusion on things. And so this is the first in a series of extensions to our website or microsites that hopefully get us to be that sort of trusted agent out there with the public, which also then opens more opportunities to work with municipalities, NGOs, builders associations, this, that, and the other. So anyways, first thing to talk about was the upcoming elections. Again, please, if you know anyone who could fill that last position, we have candidates for all the other positions coming in. Let's see, before I transition, Bill, did you want to say anything about, now, again, we're keep trying to remind folks that Texas is the co-host for the Association of Solar Energy's annual meeting. Will be in Austin, and Bill's actually been the closest on that. Do you want to say where we stand on those things?
Yes, that's the Texas Solar Energy Society, TXSES, is the host. The conference is in October. It's called Solar 2026, run by the American Solar Energy Society with help from the Texas Solar Energy Society. It will be the 50th anniversary, I believe, of the Texas Solar Energy Society. I think I've got that right. And the main speaker, the keynote speaker, will be Bill McKibben, who's very well known in the environmental world. And the moderator will be Chris Boyd from KERA. We've gotten her to moderate. We've organized that. So that will be going on in October. I've sent out a little bit of information about that already to the groups.io, but I'll send out more as things develop. So it's proving to be a pretty interesting conference, and there's going to be a lot of interesting things. These conferences, they're not free. It costs a significant amount to go to them, but there are several different technical tracks. So there's technical tracks. There's people presenting in them from the Rocky Mountain Institute. No, well, what used to be NREL, but now is the right. No, it's National Lab of the Rockies. Exactly, National Lab of the Rockies. So they'll be presenting, as well as a number of universities, on technical topics. So there'll be those kind of topics that'll be presented, as well as societal topics. There's going to be an area about sustainable building technologies, as well as energy technologies. So it'll be a pretty good environmental kind of thing. The venue is the Palmer Auditorium in downtown Austin. So right down there on Town Lake, and a nice venue. And they're arranging some tours of solar energy installations in Austin during the meeting, as well as other things. So it should be a very interesting thing. This will be the first time, I think, ever maybe, that this conference has come to Texas. So that's what's going on in October.
Just wanted to hopefully get that on your calendar, or at least you can track with interest. And the organizers are doing a really great job of sort of mixing Texas specifics with national themes. And, Texas certainly has nothing to sneeze at in terms of talking about the great things that are going on with solar. Matter of fact, I guess I read for the first time that, not only are we number one in the country for wind energy, but the battery installations have just been going absolutely crazy lately, as well as the solar installations. And so we might be number one in solar, I think I heard, by the end of the year for the first time ever, which is just absolutely ridiculous growth. I mean, we didn't have, I retired from Encore just a couple of years ago, Encore Electric Delivery, and there was no, I take it back. There was a little bit of interconnected solar power other than the residential or small commercial, but not really power plants until the last handful of years. And now it's over 20 gigawatts already and climbing.
And then the last couple of years, Texas has really become a leader in the battery storage.
Battery storage has been
Connected.
even more phenomenal growth. That I know for a fact. We had no interconnected battery until maybe 5 years ago, I want to say, and it's just gone from 0 to, it's in the double digit, I think, gigawatts now. So anyways, lots of interesting stuff going on there. One other thing, so upcoming events, well, before we get to upcoming events, there's the question of how would you find out about our events? We are in an uncomfortable position at the moment. We are not able to make routine updates to our website. So we've been using the Groups.io account, and we've been using our constant contact accounts, et cetera, to try to keep everybody apprised of where we are right now. It's just an unfortunate situation we're in with our both our provider and the contract we have with them, the hosting service, as well as, well, bear with us, things are getting better. But then in terms of upcoming events, I don't believe we have ironed down April, because I am still trying to iron down. Once a year, we try to do a tour out to a local facility. And we did just this week get the green light to do a tour at the Toyota headquarters site, but I haven't been able to confirm that we'll be able to do that in April. The other thing that we confirmed is it won't be at our normal meeting time on a Saturday, but they are willing to push it until late in the afternoon. So something like 5, 6 o'clock start on a weekday, date to be determined. Really exciting facility. Talk about folks who were committed to doing things a decade ago that should be just bread and butter for every industry out there. I mean, they've got 8.8 gigawatts, or megawatts. Wouldn't that be something? No, they got 8.8 megawatts of solar on their site, and that was a decade ago. And they don't. It's not an islandable microgrid site, but they are talking about adding some storage to that. But the reason that we'll be going there isn't just to view their 10-year-old installation of a lot of solar at their headquarters, but they also just in December commissioned the first grid interconnected V2G site in all of Encore's service territory, other than the ones that Encore owned itself. So the first third party, they've got a charger out there that they're doing a number of use case studies with. They have a handful of other DER assets around it. They've got all sorts of employee charging and incentive programs and this, that, and the other. The company, this is, well, I guess Toyota would like to say that they've got more electric vehicles on the road than anybody else, and they are. I mean, look at hybrids. Been doing that for I don't even know how long. But they've got a lot of other really interesting programs we'll hear about on the tour. The tour will be a sign-up activity, probably be limited to a couple dozen people. Again, we'll get the notice out there and first come, first serve on that. They've got a fantastic museum called the Customer Experience Center. It's mostly oriented around their automotive history in general, but they'll talk about what they're doing in second life batteries. They'll talk about what they're doing in solid state batteries. They've got, in a lot of markets that there's an app that their electric vehicle owners get that allow you to profile when to charge by grid conditions and things like that. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that they're doing in the renewable and or responsible energy space that we'll hear about while we're out there. And that leads me to really, I think, the last thing, unless there's any other business that anyone needs to bring forward. No, okay. As I give the mic to Matt, this will be the last time you folks have to deal with this, where I sort of give my slant on what the talker's going to give before the talker gets to give it. Dallas-Fort Worth is, I remember first moving here. My gosh, how long ago was that? 40 some odd years ago, 50 years ago, whatever. And, all these logistics centers. And now, how's that changed? It's only gotten more like that. So you've got all of these areas. The area has, is it 3 or 4 federally recognized inland ports. There are lots of things that the state and the local governments have done to promote, those places being able to do business in a market responsible and attractive fashion. And so when you start thinking about, tens of thousands of vehicles going in and out of all of these centers, or inside we were talking about this earlier, or inside those distribution centers, all the tens and thousands of forklifts that are moving things around from one bay to another. This is a lot of energy we're talking about. And it's also from a energy expenditure or a company cost profile, or even from an air quality profile. We got knocked back a year ago in terms of the EPA assessment for the Dallas-Fort Worth air qualities, and so now we moved from something like severe to extreme, or something like that. They different nouns that they move. Okay, we were excessive, and I think we're severe now, or something like that. Well, and the thing is that for ages, the metroplex area, this has been mostly under the watch of the North Central Texas Council of Governments, which has the authority for their 100 and some odd constituent cities to manage collectively certain things like transportation and air quality, has mitigated a lot the point sources of manufacturing, which, by the way, we're not a Houston. It's not as if an awful lot of that in our area. Transportation is one of the largest sources of those non-attainments. And so there's been a lot of work through incentive programs and just attention on it, of dealing with what's going on at these logistics centers. Well, we're going to hear from Matt what his company, MW Logistics, does in that space. And it's really just a huge opportunity for things that make both economic and environmental sense to meet on the same balance sheet. And so I think, well, okay, one other dumb thing that I did. So driving out here, I have to come down a big chunk of LBJ. I went past, I estimated $400 million worth of vehicles on the road today. I was just sort of partway down, I started counting and thinking, what would happen if instead of those just being out there blowing through their tailpipes, which is, some 98% of them probably, they were paying half as much for their fuel and actually contributing to the resilience of the grid as part of that private investment of $400 million. And so that was my last little dumb thing I get to say as your outgoing chairperson. But we're going to see what happens when you take little things like that and try to connect them to other sources of revenue.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I feel honored to be the guest speaker on when you're changing roles. So thank you so much for having me. So a couple questions I'll ask to get us started. So who's familiar with JB Hunt? Right, everybody's familiar with the JB Hunt. DHL, right? Everybody knows who DHL is. There are a lot of competitors in the space. NFI, Hub Group. You see the green intermodal containers on a train as you go by. All of those companies are companies that we compete with on a daily basis. As a third-party logistics company, we compete with those big guys all day, every day, and they have much more of a footprint in and around the country. Some of those companies are global, but we compete with those guys every single day to move goods and services, or to move goods around the country. We all have a lot of the same customers. And so for us as an organization, you'll see here in just a minute, we're not quite that big, but we have to find ways to add value differently than some of those guys do. And so we'll talk a little bit here shortly about how we do that and what we do in the electric vehicle space. My name is Matt McGuire. I'm the Director of Sales for MW Logistics here in Dallas. And we are a third-party logistics company. This is our 25th year to be in business. And we are family founded. So Chairman and founder Mitchell Ward, born and raised in Lockhart, down in South Texas, and has a huge passion for what we do servicing customers. And so as we kind of go through this presentation, you'll see how we have separated ourselves in the logistics and transportation space as a third-party logistics company, formerly known or more commonly known as a broker, freight broker. I walk around a lot, so I may bump into this thing a few times. But we are a freight broker. And so, again, we have to figure out a way to differentiate ourselves. A couple of things that we've done in order to do that is from a technology perspective, but more importantly today while we're here is we are the largest MBE provider of electric vehicles in the space. We are number 4 nationwide behind FedEx, UPS, and Amazon, right? FedEx, UPS, and Amazon, they all do it for their private fleets, right? We bring the electric vehicle piece to the market from a public consumption standpoint. So that's where we have separated ourselves. There aren't a lot of 3PLs in terms of freight brokers or third-party logistics companies that do it. Your DHLs and some of those guys kind of qualify themselves as a 3PL, but they don't take that to other clients other than their own owned warehousing facilities, right? So that's a differentiator for us. Again, and I won't clear all of these slides. This is just our leadership team. There's Mitchell Ward there in the middle, gentleman in the cowboy hat, huge passion for it, very, very well connected here in the DFW market. And that is his wife, Ms. Ward, and she handles a ton of things here at MW Logistics as well. So it's, we aren't a huge corporation, right? We compete with a lot of these guys every day. And in the yard management space is what we'll talk about today. We've been kind of kicking their butt, which is nice. And for a few reasons why we'll kind of discuss. So again, the biggest piece for us is we have to be agile. We have to do things a little bit differently. We have to bring different products and services to the market, different than some of our competition does. And we do that with the yard management piece. So freight brokers, these are kind of our core competencies. Freight brokerage, dedicated transportation, yard management, drayage and warehousing. You kind of talked about the ports. The drayage piece, we do a little bit of that. We're slowly migrating into more of that business, but we want to really focus on what we do well. And we consider ourselves, or we tell people we're Raising Cane's. Chicken fingers, chicken fingers, chicken fingers. And then if you want some toast, we'll throw in a piece of toast, right? But you're not going to get a cheeseburger at Raising Cane's, right? They do what they do really, really well. And there's a need there. So from a dedicated transportation and yard management, those two things oftentimes fit together. And so we kind of look through, and I mentioned we're a freight broker, but we consider ourselves an integrated transportation provider, meaning we look at a customer's supply chain and their transportation network holistically, and we don't necessarily silo ourselves to one segment of their business, right? We have different service offerings that we can certainly help with. And I'll give some examples as to how that integration takes place with the yard management piece and with the electric vehicles. I'll touch on this a little bit. And I think everybody will have the presentation, but the transportation market is changing. We talked about, the growth in DFW has been exponential, right? You go to Alliance and look at that Alliance Gateway area, right? Everybody is moving their DCs, their headquarters, all, DFW is a hotbed, right? And will continue to grow because of the way consumer spending patterns are changing. Dallas and Chicago, right? That Dallas, Kansas City, Chicago, middle of the country is exploding. I do a lot of business in Kansas City, and they're kind of going through a similar type of thing. But it's because of the geographic location that we're in the middle of the country. Consumer spending patterns change. Everybody builds DCs right? And I'll give you guys an example. So I was just with Dollar General earlier in the week, and there are over 21,000 Dollar Generals around the country. Their goal is to not have a Dollar General more than 5 miles away from anybody in the country. So now that you know this, when you're driving around, see how many Dollar Generals there are. There's 21,000 of them, right? It's one of those things. Now that you're aware of it, you'll see them everywhere. It's pretty remarkable, right? But they're in short proximity or close proximity to people because those consumer spending patterns change. We all know the facilitation of what COVID did, and it continues to evolve, right? The shorter length of haul that someone has to ship a product, the cheaper the lower the cost, right? And so that being said, where that's advantageous for us as somebody that plays in this warehousing and drayage and in transportation yard management spaces, there are more facilities that have to be managed, right? And more opportunities where the electric yard truck use case is more important, right? And so, absolutely. A third-party logistics company. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And so this is where we come into play with our electric vehicle network and how we integrate that piece of equipment, that technology into our customers. So the diesel idle reduction program, we have equipment that manages and kind of tracks idle time on a diesel truck. There's just more of those, right? There's more of those in our network with our customer base than there are on the electric side. We are vastly improving the number and increasing the number of electric trucks that we have that are operational. But there's really two ways that we look at it: environmental and economic, right? So it has to make business sense for an organization from a cost management perspective to transition to an electric truck, right? And so how can we overcome those objections? How can we overcome those barriers in order to help a client see that there are economic and environmental benefits to putting an electric truck on site? And this is just some overall statistics of our fleet. Again, over 13 million pounds of CO2 avoided, 600,000 gallons of diesel saved. One of the major questions that we get is uptime and performance versus a diesel tractor. Over 400,000 hours in operation, 97% uptime. That number is 97 because putting 100 makes people raise their eyebrows, but it's virtually 100. And correct. Yep. Essentially use time, right? So they're not down because of any type of maintenance or down because of any type of issue, right? We don't have oil changes. We don't have hydraulic failures, right? We don't have a lot of those challenges that we do. And we kind of talked before the presentation got started is we have these electric vehicles in Phoenix where it gets 120, 130, no problem. We have them in Buffalo, New York, Aberdeen, Maryland, southern part of Canada, right? Where on the diesel side, some of the challenges that we face are fuel gelling, right? With electric truck, we don't have that problem. So the performance certainly of these electric trucks outperforms a diesel day in and day out. A few other benefits to an electric truck that we've experienced throughout our tenure in the space is the truck driver is aging out, right? Nobody's getting out of school. Nobody turns 18 and says, hey, I want to be a truck driver, right? So as an industry, how can we figure out a way to put people in trucks, right? And there's a lot of legislation and a lot of things going on government-wise that impact our ability to put drivers in trucks. But with an electric yard truck, it's a giant Tesla. That's exactly what I tell everybody. It's a giant Tesla. Regenerative braking, all of the things that you would experience in your normal electric four-wheel car is the same exact thing. And a story that I like to tell, we'll get into some nuts and bolts, is we put one up in a really cold market in the Northeast. 2 days later, I get a call from my site manager, and he's like, "Hey, I have a problem." I'm like, "We just put this truck. I just flew to Dallas. I do not want to get back on a plane and drive back to the Northeast. What's the problem?" The driver's upset because the seat heater, the seat's too hot. And I was like, "Well, 2 days ago you didn't have one, so Merry Christmas." But if that's the only problem we have, we're in a good spot, right? And so, yes, we can turn that down, Mr. Driver, to make your cab experience a little more comfortable. So that's 100% true story. That is not fabricated, and we tell that story a lot because it's funny. But that goes to the driver and user experience in those trucks. So there's economic, there's environmental benefits, there's cost value benefits to the client, but then from us with driver retention, right? There's countless dollars saved on our side as well, because once those guys get in a truck, and it's oftentimes somebody that transitions from a diesel to an electric truck, and it's an old head that's driven a diesel truck for 30 years, and I don't want this dang electric truck, and they get in it and they're like, "I'm not getting out," right? And so there's the vibrations of a diesel tractor, the harmonic vibrations, the diesel fumes that they're ingesting on a daily basis, right? All of those things are gone. So not only is it from a customer and client standpoint, but from a driver and user experience standpoint. And then the zero tailpipe emissions at the customer facilities, and we'll kind of talk through a little bit of why that's important. You can also fuel on site. You have to drive somewhere to. That's correct. So another benefit from a cost, from a risk and liability perspective, in the current environment, if you only have diesel, you either have to go off site to fuel it, right? And that takes, depending on location, 45 minutes to an hour, right? Or you bring a giant bomb to their facility with a flatbed truck with a huge tank of diesel fuel in it, and now you've got all those environmental risks at play. Well, all of that is removed if you go the electric truck route, right? And so 100%, right? Absolutely. We talked before, a client of ours, we were there on site this week, having some kind of top to top discussions, and that gentleman is a C-suite representative, and he was pulled in immediately halfway through our meeting top to top to discuss fuel. That facility, or that organization, has over 2,000 trucks in their private fleet. And so when you see that major spike in fuel, that raises questions. Well, interestingly enough, we went to dinner that night, and the conversation was much more around what we can do from an electric vehicle standpoint, right? So there's value there for sure. So this is just a little bit. This isn't the whole thing. I didn't want to show you guys a giant grid with lines all over it that you can't even see, but these are some major markets that we operate and own electric vehicles in. Atlanta, Georgia, for a big CPG customer out there, we're putting 6 in their facility. The build out and the infrastructure has already started, and we're really excited about that. We have some here in Dallas as well, up in the Aberdeen, Maryland footprint. And as kind of mentioned earlier, so this is just one dot, but all of these facilities, because it's a distribution center, it's a manufacturing facility, we move finished goods in and around the distribution center or the manufacturing plant, or to and from, right? But we also have inbound products, so caps, bottles, labels, right? Inbound product or raw materials, if you will, into that facility. And so we work to leverage the electric vehicle use on a case-by-case scenario. It doesn't fit all cases, right? But if there's a way for us to do it, then we do it. And what that does is that increases the footprint, and it helps reduce the carbon footprint. The more that tractor is in use in the on-key hours, and that thing's going over the road, then the higher CO2 abatement numbers, right? And so this is what they look like. If you're familiar with a tug or a yard jockey or a yard truck, this is exactly what they are. This is at one of our facilities up in the Northeast. And these are, the charger is there. That's one variation of the charging cabinet that we use. But those are the 2 tractors at that specific facility. And because of the distribution of this presentation, I did not share, or I removed the video from the presentation, but I'll send it to you so you can distribute. But anytime that we do this, just from From a PR standpoint, we do a little commercial for the client so that they can promote the use of the electric vehicles across their network. That reports up to the C-suite folks, maybe to Wall Street if they're publicly traded, right? And in this specific customer, they have a lot of our material from those videos used in a lot of their marketing materials and stuff that gets sent up to Wall Street, or just promotional type information. And what that does, and I was telling Bill just a little bit ago, is we have a client in this market, not this customer, but we have some electric vehicles in Dallas, and we were having a KPI discussion earlier in the week, and he wanted to have some discussions about some EVs, right? And so he's like, well, I want to be the first one. I'm like, well, you're not the first one for this organization, but he was like, well, I'm going to be the first one on this campus, and it's their headquarter campus. So he wants to be the first one to bring an electric vehicle to that organization. And so we'll be working in close proximity with him to get that done at his facility. And sure. You're good. You ask away.
So these are not long haul vehicles.
Sure.
Some of them are road licensed.
Sure.
But what I'm getting to is the size of battery. They don't really need these. So these are only 100 kWh, so that's probably a standard ECFC charger, not megawatt charging.
So what I will tell you, is from a charging standpoint, right? Each tractor at each facility is spec'd to match that facility. So this specific facility, there's a distribution center about a half mile down the road. These things are in use 24/7. And so with this specific configuration, if that tractor was at zero charge, it takes about 2 hours to charge it completely, and that thing can run about 18 hours without having to be charged again. I don't know if that helps you at all, but we operate with these, what's called an opportunity charge. So as a driver goes to break, or a driver goes to lunch, or he has to go turn in paperwork, right? He can just go plug it in for 10, 15, 20 minutes. So it's not a scenario where like a Tesla or like an EV where you plug it in overnight and it takes a couple of hours to get. These are fast chargers. It gets those things charged pretty quickly. So again, in terms of battery size, they're spec'd a little bit different based on the site. I have another site here actually locally where that configuration is much smaller, because it's just not used quite as much as some of these other sites.
Where I was going was just in case anybody in the audience is thinking, oh, well, wait, couple hours might sound bad.
Sure.
On the long haul, it's the road freight. It's been 3-4 years now. There's a new standard for charging that go up to, I think, as opposed to this one that max out at about
350 kW, that's probably right. You probably got about a 200 kW battery in there. It can't charge at that rate the whole time. So these are going to be CHAdeMO level 2 chargers, which are still fast chargers,
Sure.
But for the open road freight with larger batteries, there's an even faster fast charger.
Sure. Yeah, and that's not this use case, right? And
Yeah.
even when these are public road use, like these are, they are spec'd for that specific, but it's a half mile down the road, right? We have some sites where it's a mile and a half, 2 miles down the road. And we even have to still be careful on how we use them in that use case based on that public roadway, right? If the posted speed limit sign is less than 45, we're typically okay. But if that posted speed, even if we're going a half mile down the road to a mile down the road, if that speed limit's 50, 55, we don't use them, right? Because by the time that thing pulls out with a huge trailer on the back of it and gets going, it's not going to get up to that speed anyway, right? But so we have to spec those and be a little bit mindful of how those things are being used. So again, it's not just your cookie cutter tractor that's being pulled off the line and then just put into production, right? The way that the batteries are cased in Phoenix is different than the way the batteries are cased in the Northeast, right? And what's interesting about these is yard conditions play a major factor because of all of the AI and all of the batteries are underneath. So the clearance is lower than a normal diesel tractor. So one of the things, and we talked a little bit about an infrastructure fund, one of the things that we do to help offset some of the cost challenges that we experience is creating an infrastructure fund based on the site to help, right, overcome some of those variables, overcome some of those cost objections. And okay, let's say, and I'm just throwing out numbers here, right, but we'll give you $100,000 in infrastructure fund. Well, that will maybe help bring the power from the building to the charger, but then also with like yard condition improvements, right? So if it's a gravel lot, we'll come in and we'll restripe it, or we'll smooth it out so that these things get the optimal use out of it. And that uptime remains that 97%. Because if you have, a yard that is not suitable for it, then you have a lot of issues, and you got batteries banging around on the bottom of, bottoming out in a yard, then we've got problems there. So we try and overcome, as an organization, we try and help overcome a lot of those objections. But I wanted to show you that's exactly what they look like. And again, I'll get you that video so you can distribute that amongst the group. So we've talked, well, let me pause there. I know you had some great questions. Anybody else have any questions regarding kind of what we've talked about so far? And I know there's some folks listening online as well.
Is anybody online want to unmute and ask any questions? I guess not right now.
Sure.
Are you, more of the vehicle OEMs are getting into this space? Is your company looking around at different partners?
We always look, right? There's a conference, Advanced Clean Technologies, the ACT conference that we go to every year. We look at a lot of different technologies as it comes out. One of the things that we are heavily interested in is battery powered reefer trailers, right? We have a lot of customers, especially in the food and bev business, right? We do a lot of CPG, consumer packaged goods, and food and bev. So we have customers that have 53-foot, reefer trailers. We talk fuel, right? We may have an electric vehicle where there's no fuel, but that fuel truck still has to come on site to fuel a bunch of trailers. So yes, in this use case, the tractor environmental benefits are there, and the cost benefits are there, but you're still bringing a giant tank of fuel to come fill a bunch of reefers. So there's some new technology that's entering the marketplace in terms of trailers as well. And so we're extremely interested in that and having conversations with our team around finding some, beta testing opportunities where we can work with the supplier of that equipment and test it with a customer. There are a few different ways that can be done. We haven't done it yet, but I know I would be willing to bet in 2026 we will have at least one battery powered reefer trailer in production by the end of 2026. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Refrigerated trailer, yes. Reefer, that's what we call it, reefer, but yes, refrigerated trailer. So a lot of food and beverage products, right, that have to be temperature controlled. And so what happens is, in environments where those trailers go and maybe sit for storage, right? A lot of these facilities, they've outgrown their current facility that they're in terms of a distribution center. And so we will lease them a lot of trailers, and they essentially create a warehouse on wheels. So especially if that trailer is just sitting in a storage capacity and it's not moving over the road, being able to plug that trailer in, you don't have to worry about a fuel tanker coming and fueling it, right? You have the AI and the telematics data that reports directly from that unit itself into a database that then gives the client peace of mind in terms of how is that refrigerated unit on that trailer performing, right? If it's a diesel tractor, there are some systems that you can look at, but really somebody has to go look at that thing, right? And somebody has to make sure the temperature integrity remains intact. But with the AI and the battery powered unit, all of that feeds to a database, and that can be done by sitting at your desk and evaluating the performance of that unit. So certainly to your point, there are some other opportunities in terms of whether it is a different, OEM on the yard truck side, or in this case, from a trailer perspective. Yes, sir.
So I would imagine Sorry. I'll repeat the question. So a lot of these logistics places I see probably have large roofs that could host or, handle solar. Do you see a lot of them installing solar to help charge this equipment?
We do. We're starting to see it more, and we don't play in that space, but we do see it, right? We see a lot of these DCs and a lot of these manufacturing facilities using solar as a way to help power, for sure. A distribution center. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Sorry. Yeah. So some of the benefits, right? The financial benefits, we eliminate the diesel and the DEF cost, diesel exhaust fluid. I admittedly, I drive a diesel truck and have been, Bill and I had the discussion earlier, really looking at the EV side of it, but it is a cost. It certainly is a cost, and it's oftentimes not convenient, right? We have a facility in Atlanta where there is a 1,000-gallon DEF tank to fuel our tractors, right? Well, they asked us to figure out a way to remove that DEF tank and use off-site fueling facility for the DEF for the tractor, because they were going to get some grants from the city and from the government of that state in an effort to remove a lot of those risks and a lot of those environmental factors at that site. So there are some financial implications there. And because we were able to remove it and find a different solution, we were able to save them money. But it is an inconvenience, right? It's another component of a diesel unit that can potentially have issues, and that completely goes away with an electric truck. Yes, ma'am. So it's essentially just like fueling your truck. DEF costs. She's asking can I explain what DEF costs are? So whenever a diesel tractor goes to fill up at a fueling station, they have two tanks. They have a fuel tank and they have a DEF tank. So it's literally just at your fueling station, and it's similar cost. It's actually a little bit higher, but the tank is a little bit less. So it's another expense that is incurred with a diesel tractor. So if we have an electric truck on site, then the client no longer experiences those costs, right? And so typically the fuel cost is passed on to the customer. Otherwise, we would have to change our rates to include the cost, and it's just a pass-through cost. Oftentimes there's no markup or anything that we fill up, we send the receipts in, they reimburse us for those costs. So with the electric tractor, there's no fuel and there's no DEF. Right? And the net energy savings there between 75 and 95% in typical operations. The reason why that's not 100 is oftentimes we will have just a backup diesel unit on site in the event we have some unforeseen issue. We have an older kind of we would probably do away with a dinosaur, but it's a diesel tractor there. And if they have to be in use for any length of time, there may be some fuel costs or some DEF costs. And then we talk energy or efficiency gains up to 5% in 24/7 operations versus diesel fueling. So these tractors, if the fuel tank doesn't come to the site, then those tractors have to go off site, right? Well, the client is paying for a guy to go to the fuel station and fuel up. Well, that is time where that tractor is not moving and that driver is not moving goods around that facility, which is what they're ultimately paid to do, right? So, and no one would ever abuse that time, right? No one would ever go take an extra 30 minutes or grab a snack or make a couple of phone calls, right? So what we oftentimes see is that, let's say 30 minutes, that 30 minutes turns into 45, right? Well, you do that if you've got 4, 5, 6 drivers on site at that facility, that's a lot of time wasted. Not only that, then you've got the idle time piece of it. You've got the additional fuel consumption. And so there are a lot of negative benefits there. But with the electric tractor, we see a major change, right? They don't have to go off site. Now the drivers sometimes don't like that too much because they don't get an extra break in there. But in terms of efficiency and in the 24-hour operation, there's significant uptime there.
So I wanted a little more detailed information about DEF, diesel exhaust fluid, just because I don't know this world. It says a non-toxic solution of 32.5% urea and 67.5% deionized water injected to the exhaust stream. It keeps emissions down. But I just wanted to point out that's water that will be saved in this process. And that's a huge issue in the state of Texas and across the nation.
There was another, another thing I like about having all the telematics integrated. You mentioned earlier that, well, if the battery is empty, it might take a couple of hours and you can schedule these in with breaks and this and that. But without knowing the particular manufacturer, the particular size of the battery, the particular use case, the other opportunity is that, you might be able to charge, let's say 60% of the battery in 10% of that time, because the closer they are to empty, the faster they are to charge. So you've also got the opportunity. It's just different than having a fuel fluid where you can kind of think of, it makes no difference if I fuel it up now versus later. It's going to just take these couple of minutes. But with electricity, it's not a bad thing that it's different. It's just different. Sure. And so you have the opportunity that, we're also going to optimize the charging cycle such that the smallest amount of time on that charger gets us the more bang for the buck. That's absolutely right. In how we charge.
That's absolutely right. And that's where the opportunity charge piece comes into play. We if they're under 60%, then we ask them to charge, right? But they typically stay in that 80 to 90, 95%, right? And shift change plays a major role in that, right? But to your point, we don't necessarily have to work them down to zero, right? But that 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes of charging time, and now we're back to that 85, 90%, and we're golden for the rest of the day. Absolutely. Sure. Sure.
Instead of 85, you'll find that your time on charging is a lot less.
Yeah, very good. Very good point. The other piece of it too is from the M&R, maintenance and repair costs, right? 50% reduction in maintenance and repair costs, whether that is scheduled or unscheduled, right? We have those tractors that are the diesel tractors have to go through a preventative maintenance. It's just like your oil change. You go in and do your 10-point inspection. Some places 10, sometimes it's 50, whatever the case is, right? Those have to be scheduled. We do that on the M&R, on the electric vehicle side. However, a lot of that, because it's essentially it's a computer program, a lot of what they're doing, software updates can be done remote. And then here's a unique thing about the newer models of these electric trucks and the OEMs that we use is they have an automatic greaser for the fifth wheel. So we don't have to have a tech come out and grease that fifth wheel at a scheduled time. The automatic greaser does that. So again, uptime is improved. And that's just one of the few features, but uptime is improved. We don't have to put that out. A tech comes out and has to do that, right? So we see maintenance and repair costs are again, I'm not going to say zero, but they're significantly lower. And that 50% is conservative, but they're significantly lower than what the diesel tractor is. And so it's certainly, again, anytime that we have a diesel tractor down, that's lost money. We're either having to get another unit in to replace the one that's down, or maybe the backup who potentially could have been sitting for 4, 5, 6 days, 10 days, 2 weeks. Now we're expecting that tractor, it's typically older, to start right back up and join the fight, and that doesn't always work. Yes, sir. Yes. We do. Because of it's not a scenario where the driver is abusing the brake piece of it, right? The weight and how the regenerative braking systems work, we see significant decrease there as well. And again, it's letting the machine do the work versus a driver do the work, and it's going to always be a little bit more abused on the driver side. So we see that oftentimes for sure. That's a great call. The question was, do we see a reduction in brake repairs or braking costs with the EV versus the diesel? And we absolutely do. And then again, right, the operating benefits, right? We've talked some financial benefits here, and I'll just recap. So 0 idle time, 52% is the average for the diesel terminal tractors, a reduction in maintenance and repair costs, increased, more efficient use of labor due to the opportunity charge versus fueling. The opportunity charge is a 30-minute, 15-minute operation versus being off-site and diesel fueling. That can take 30, 45 minutes, an hour, really depending on the scenario. And then, of course, the elimination of the fuel and the diesel exhaust fluid cost. And to kind of get into some operating benefits, we've talked a little bit about them, but the zero tailpipe emissions, lower noise, heat, and vibration, that's an overall better driver experience, right? And so, drivers are aging out of the business. And so if we can find a way to put a driver in a truck and that experience go well for them, then the probability and the retention rate is incrementally higher. But what we've started to see too is these guys that get in these electric trucks, then they'll start referring their buddies that are looking for work. Right? It's a little easier to drive. You're not going to get in a diesel truck and be beat to heck all day. Hey, come try this out. It's pretty cool, right? It's a giant Tesla. So we've seen a lot of that as well. Cold weather performance, no fuel gelling concerns, no block heaters, better traction. We talked torque just in the sidebar conversation, but they perform extremely well in winter weather conditions because of the torque. We have a facility that has a pretty decent hill in it, and that was the major concern of the client. And so we just brought one out a few weeks ago in some bad weather and just said, hey, put your heaviest trailer, container, whatever you want, put it on us and let us show you how it performs. And we knew what the performance would be, but the client was very surprised, and we will be working towards that conversion from diesel to electric here in the very near future. So very exciting there. And then the truck and charger models, this is just kind of generalities, operate between -40 and 130 degrees Fahrenheit. We've had use cases where not quite -40, but pretty dang close. Maybe wind chills to -40, some up in the Northeast and in southern part of Canada, where those ranges have been experienced. Let's see. So we talk telematics. So every month, the tractor sends us a report of really everything that's on this. That's everything on this file here. So it's prettied up for presentation purposes, and this is what goes out to our clients. But it's tracked month over month, and so for this specific location, this unit or these two units, over 5,300 of key on, call it 5,400 of key on time hours, 29,244 kilowatts consumed. But when we look over at the CO2 abatement numbers, over 200,000 pounds of CO2 and 100 tons of emissions, 90 metric tons of carbon essentially omitted. And I do this because, one, I want to know, because I'm not as super crazy technical, but between 15 and 20 gasoline cars taken off the road for a full year. People can relate to that, right? And this is just one use case, right? This is one facility with two trucks. And so one of those trucks is used 24/7, and one of those trucks is used really in a kind of a half of an environment, right? Maybe 8 hours a day for just a couple days, or they're both not used for the 24-hour time frame. One is used 24 hours, the other one isn't. So This goes and is sent to our clients. They can report on it. We have kind of discussions, but each tractor sends us this data, and we can report on it to the client. It is. Yep. He was asking if it's Orange EV software. Orange EV is the OEM. That is Orange EV software. It sends us the data. We, of course, scrub it to make sure that the data is accurate, just in terms of on time. Really, the focus there is on time hours, to make sure that there was no discrepancy in terms of how the vehicle, or the number of hours the vehicle was used. And I'll go back to this. So this is, from this side, this is really what the ESG teams report on, right? We have some budgeting things that we send, and we kind of show procurement, and we show what the fuel savings piece looks like. This is really the ESG teams and the CO2 abatement side of it, what that looks like to the client. So they take this, they report on upstream to those stakeholders. And so again, I'm not by any means a super technical guy. So 15 to 20 gasoline cars makes way more sense than some of these numbers to me. And oftentimes it does to a lot of other folks. But nonetheless, what that tells us is the plan is working, the tractors are working how they're intended to work. And the more that we can use them, then the more environmental impact we have.
So in case anybody tries to take these numbers who's familiar with EVs and wants to talk about miles per kilowatt hour, they'll notice on here that this is an extremely low, and I'm about to say why. We already know that even an EV pickup is maybe not even half as efficient as an EV sedan. Once you start getting into these heavy vehicles, the numbers that you typically see are only about maybe a third of what you would normally get in a sedan. These numbers are way worse than that, but think about their use case.
Sure.
They're never coming to highway speed. Sure. They're never gliding. Sure. They're never working at efficiencies. They are accelerating or deaccelerating the whole time.
with 35, 40, 45,000 pounds of a trailer on top of the gross weight from the vehicle itself. Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Charging specs, I wanted to just show, this is one of the newer models that we have in use here. You saw, I'm going to go back, so sorry, but I'm going to go back a couple slides. You see how big that cabinet is versus this cabinet? It's probably not hard to tell. It's probably hard to tell there. That cabinet is probably this big, maybe, and it's about that long. It almost looks like a gun safe, if we're being honest. That's about what it is. So I have some photos I'll send to you. But yeah, so different specs call for different pieces of equipment, and this is just one of the chargers that we use. And so wanted to just kind of show that these things, really, for the most part, most use cases, we just have one tractor charging at a time. So it doesn't have to be this large footprint, right? We can charge, in this specific case, we can charge 2 at a time. We don't typically, but in the event we need to, we can. But these are the specs for those of y'all interested here of this specific unit. And again, it's spec'd a little bit differently based on use case and site-specific requirements based on the tractor and some of those tractor specs, but this is the overall gist of what one of these chargers does. And I'll talk a little bit here. This is our site here in Irving. When I talk about looking at it holistically, what we were able to do there is, it was diesel. We converted it to electric. They had a different provider moving product to and from a different warehouse. We integrated that into our operation. We were able to not only start seeing real in the year savings from the electric vehicle side, but a few other things that we've done. But the biggest highlight here is that $100,000 plus in annual fuel savings, because of just converting that over from electric or from diesel to electric. And then the improvement in cycle time, right? Again, we talk about those guys, those trucks don't have to go off site. So in fast-paced environments where these trailers have to get in and out of a door very, very quickly because they need an empty trailer to reload product to get it out. Cycle time is a huge improvement in cycle time is a huge benefit, just like the detraction of the cycle time. If you're going off site, then you're averaging, let's just call it 20 minutes, 30 minutes to move a trailer, right? You're going off site for 45 minutes. Well, now that average cycle time meaning a task is created in the software platform that says, hey, Matt, you need to go move trailer 1, 2, 3, 4 from dock 1, and you need to go put it in lot 7, right? That cycle time, once that task is put into the system, now there's a timestamp to it, right? So let's just say me as a driver, I go get in my truck and that takes me 20 minutes to go do, right? If I have to go off site, now that makes my average cycle time spike, right? If I have to go fuel, well, I don't have to do that. So now we see a reduction in cycle time, which means they can turn more trailers in the course of a time frame, and in the course of a shift, in the course of a day, right? So when we start to have, when we deploy these EV tractors and we start to show them tangible data, similar to what we talked about, is they get on calls inside of their organization and they can say, hey, our average cycle time just dropped 7 minutes. Right? Well, somebody else in another city's going, well, what are you doing? Right? Like, we need some help over here. Well, hey, call Matt, call MW Logistics. Hey, here's what we're doing. We've seen a big jump since we deployed the electric vehicles, right? So some other benefits there, just operationally.
But by the way, order of magnitude, roughly how expensive would a diesel tug be versus an electric tug?
That's a great question. Anybody have any guesses?
Well,
Huh? Anybody else?
but what was the actual dollar numbers?
Oh, I can't share that with you.
Well, no, the rough. I mean, rough.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
they're not
it's-
$10,000.
No,
but they're
so-
not $100,000 either.
Yeah.
Oh, they are.
Yeah, so they are very expensive pieces of equipment.
Okay.
They are very expensive pieces of equipment. If you're just buying it off the shelf, and this is where our competitive advantage comes into play, we have SLAs with the OEM. So we have preferred pricing, if that's what you want to call it, preferred pricing model, right? If you're buying it off the shelf and this is your first one and Randy's Widgets wants to go put an electric vehicle, you're going to pay market price. And that thing's probably going to be, if not a lot more than that, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. You're probably going to pay close to 250-ish if you're pulling it off the line.
Is that for an EV?
That's for the electric. Yeah,
Electric.
diesel probably in that 150, 170, 185 range.
Okay.
Yep. And it's not 2x. And I guess
Sure.
that really depends on spec, but you're going to pay, it's going to be
Do
substantial.
you have any estimates of the lifetime of the vehicle?
Diesel versus EV.
Electric, yeah.
So we have Gen 1s that are, what's our Gen 1? Our Gen 1 is 8 years old, over 8 years old, and he still has, I want to say like 83% battery life left.
Well,
So we don't know the answer to that question because we haven't ended the life cycle.
and let's see what I was going to say about that.
That's for like near
Absolutely.
Does your client own the vehicle?
No,
You're essentially providing a service to them.
correct.
So essentially, it's kind of like you're leasing it to them. Not exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have operators that run this business for us, right? I'm a third party. I don't own any assets. I have an operator that does this. That's where our SLA comes into play, both with the operator, both with the OEM. So because of that SLA with our OEM, we have to pull so many off of the yard, and whether we replace them or whether we're putting them and deploying them newly into production, we have a requirement that we have to pull in order, one, to get the pricing, the preferred pricing piece, and then two, from a maintenance and an OEM like service tech, the more that we pull off the line and the more density we have in a given market, then the OEM will actually hire us techs for that specific market. So we don't have every mechanic that works on these tractors is straight from the OEM. So it's not a third-party mechanic shop, right? And so it's to our advantage to create density in markets, meaning the higher number of units we put in a given geographic location, then they will hire us techs and actually put techs in that market for us in order to help support those operations. And so, we don't own the equipment. The client doesn't necessarily own the equipment there. It's part of that pricing model back to the client. They're paying a fixed cost every week or every month on what that tractor is to deploy it at that location. Yes, ma'am.
And I would just like to make sure I'm understanding SLA is service level agreement,
Yes, ma'am.
correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So that's about a 30% increase in cost for going electric. So that to me is not, I mean, when you're looking at the lifetime of the vehicle, fuel savings, no oil changes, reduction of maintenance on braking. I mean, I think that's the thing, is that people have to look at the lifetime of the vehicle costs.
And that's where,
But it wasn't 2 times.
it's
basically
and that's where we have,
30%
that's where
higher.
we have a competitive advantage because of the SLAs that we have in place. We have over 200 of these deployed around the country, right? So if you're just pulling it strictly off the lot, it is a substantially, higher cost, right? And you're getting into probably that $400,000 or $500,000 if you're just pulling it off the lot and you're just going to buy one to go put at your site. But because of our SLA, because of our relationship with the OEM, then that preferred pricing certainly is beneficial. But it overcomes, right, to your point, that's a great call out, is everyone thinks that they're crazy expensive. And they are if you're just doing it one, right? But if you do it with us, which is our story, right? Part of our selling story is it's not. And then oftentimes with grants, with incentive programs, city, state, local governments, that gap shrinkens even more, right? And then what we do as an organization to help facilitate the transition from diesel to electric is we have kind of our own incentive program, if you will, to help maybe with that build out of the infrastructure to the charging station, right? And so, but to your point, there may be an incremental equipment cost, right? Increase in equipment cost, but what are you doing in terms of your risk mitigation, in terms of your fuel savings, in terms of now you're achieving different set of ESG goals quicker, right? Within transportation. Typically, everybody wants to handle their ESG initiatives and reduce their carbon footprint by X% in 2030 with recycling, right? And maybe with, maybe lighting in their facility, right? That's typically, but now from a transportation perspective, really intermodal, meaning a train is really the only way for the most part that people even report on ESG or carbon footprint emissions, right? Now with an electric vehicle on site and the telematics reporting, those are actual tangible data points that can be achieved and that are real-time achieved, and helps organizations that are super serious about those ESG goals, helps meet those faster. And it's just a different vertical that now they have an opportunity to reduce their carbon footprint. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about that. So, and if it's not proprietary, are most of your clients concerned about ESG reporting, or are most people just doing this because it makes business sense?
Yes and yes. And the reason why I say that, it's usually 2 different departments, right? The procurement teams love it because there's typically a savings, right? The plants love it, or the distribution centers love it, or the manufacturing facilities love it because they typically will see an improvement in cycle times. They'll typically see an improvement in overall performance and efficiency, right? And then the ESG teams love it because now they can report. So it really meets a lot of different objectives, and helps these organizations meet goals in really different silos of their organization, which is better for us, right? The stickier that we can get across multiple pieces of an organization, the better we are. And ultimately what we see is once we do it at one and they start to see the tangible results, then that transitions to other facilities. and has, in our experience, has worked very well.
When you pitch this EV versus diesel to these facilities, do you lay out a detailed LCCA on both types of vehicles?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
life cycle cost analysis.
Absolutely, we do. We have an entire team that comes out. We have an entire EV team. They will come out and they will spec the site and look at a lot of these variables that impact life cycle, that impact how the vehicle is going to be used. There are situations where a client may want an EV, but the use case and the business case for it just doesn't make financial sense. Maybe it's only 8 hours a day that they're going to use it Monday through Friday, right? So the cost may not support the need for it. And we'll tell you that, right? Like I would, there may be, maybe not this facility, but maybe another facility. But we have an entire team that comes and looks at all of these different variables in order to spec the equipment, in order to do the life cycle analysis, and then with the cost benefit analysis that goes along with that, in order to present that to the client to say, hey, here's what we see, right? Here's what we see in terms of diesel. Here's what we see in terms of electric. Here's what we expect and anticipate the CO2 abatement numbers to look like, right? And then let's have the discussion.
Now, I would imagine, and we discussed this earlier, even though you might go in and show them an LCCA, TCO, whatever you want to call it, analysis of what the overall costs are, you're going into, I would imagine, usually an organization that for 20, 50 years has been maybe playing around at the edges, but doesn't really know, but has different departments. The procurement guys know what they spend and they have a budget, and them saving energy operations costs isn't in their budget. And then you've got right. Well, making the calculation is one thing. What I'm saying is that the organizationally going in there and saying, well, our analysis shows that in this department it'll cost a little, and in that one you'll save this much, in that one it'll save that much, but only if you change your procedures to be XYZ. So you're up against basically culture, and culture is harder to change than just about anything.
I'm sure it's an easier pitch if it's a 24/7 operation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Show up right away.
Absolutely right. You are 100% correct. The more on-time key hours, y'all saw that in that chart, the more that vehicle's in use, then the bigger impact the numbers have. But yes, you are 1,000% correctly. Transportation historically is very slow to evolve and change. Very, very slow to evolve and change, this being one of them. And it's a battle we fight dang near every single day. But as mentioned previously, really where I think we do a really good job as an organization is we work across multiple channels in the organization, right? The plant leaders, the distribution center leaders, they have their budgets, right? And maybe we wait until it's budget season and they can account for that into their new budget, right? Let's paper it, let's get it done, let's get the vehicles ordered, and let's be ready to go. And you'll know exactly what your cost is going to look like. And it's a predictable cost model for those organizations. It doesn't have to be, we would certainly prefer it to be today, right? But it doesn't have to be, right? And then with those contracts, those service contracts, 3-year, 5-year, 6-year, 7-year, now we aggregate that cost over a longer period of time to where maybe it's not such a large financial implication, especially up front, right? But then it's, again, predictable over that longer period of time. So now where your budget may be somewhat volatile today, right? If we can show you, hey, here's the cost benefit analysis, here's the lifetime cycle analysis of the vehicle, then over 5 years, here's what it looks like. Over 7 years, here's what it looks like. And so that number shrinks, right? And as long as we perform and do what we say we're going to do, then there's really no reason for you to make a change. You haven't made a change in 20 years. So why would, if we do what we're doing, right, with our predictable cost model, we don't have a bunch of overtime, we don't have a bunch of random maintenance costs that we're passing on to you. You're seeing all the things that we talked about. You're seeing the improvement in cycle time. You're seeing the reduction in fuel cost. You're seeing the reduction of your CO2 and carbon footprint emissions, right? All of the things that we've talked about. If we aren't performing, you can get us out of there. But as long as we perform, that's much more to your benefit.
Where are these vehicles built?
They are built in Kansas City, Missouri.
Really?
They are built. Every one of them is built by hand.
Mhm.
Every single one. It's not a Ford plant where there's 9 million machines. I've seen it. And actually we were just up there a couple of weeks ago. We were reviewing, we did a tour. They just opened a new facility. We were touring the plant, seeing how those vehicles were manufactured.
That's true.
And I'm not big on I'm not the super technical guy, but the coolest thing that I saw is there's a torque wrench. It's like an $18,000 piece of equipment. And if it doesn't achieve the number of torques, whoever uses that 2 or 3 stations down, it won't work. So those things it was remarkable to see them come off the line, see how they're put together. It's pretty cool to watch.
So is every one of these tugs essentially custom?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Every single one of them.
So what you do is you go and do a site analysis, you work out the use case, you work out with the customer, and they say, okay, this is the exact number of kilowatt hour battery we need, and et cetera, et cetera. That's probably the biggest thing that's different about them is the size of the battery.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How many of these tugs would you say that make it annually?
Oh gosh, they just opened a new facility. So what did he tell us? It's multiple thousand. I don't know the number, but it's multiple thousand that they make a year. Their new facility allows them for much larger input or output than what they were currently doing.
I was curious, does MW help the customer with the process of putting in the chargers and getting the power in there and putting in the lines, the conduit and all that stuff?
Absolutely. So we typically work with the facility vendor, whether that's an internal vendor that they have or maybe they outsource it. But we work with that vendor. Our team is there on site working with that specific facility to help spec it, make sure that it goes, that the scope of work is put together appropriately. And then we work with them throughout that entire process. We provide the tractor, we provide the charger. The cost to essentially power the charger is typically at the responsibility of the client. But again, there are grants, there are incentives. We have our own incentive program. So really we work with the client holistically in terms of what it looks like to install that piece of equipment, install the charger. And then we typically work with them financially to say, okay, here's what we can do to maybe offset some of that cost, but it doesn't come, we would ask for maybe a larger contract term or some of those things that help offset some costs. But yes, we have an entire team that works with the client holistically throughout that entire process.
And some of the clients could put solar panels on their roofs and they could dramatically offset that, which means essentially they'd have very low fuel costs.
Do the clients consider kind of like resilience costs? I was listening to some folks talking about, when we have fossil fuels, there's a resilience problem because if the fossil fuel system goes down or the price of the fossil fuel skyrockets, then we've either got cost problems or we don't have any operation. If it's not available with electricity, I would think availability would be almost 100% of the time, and the price would be locked in basically.
Yeah, and that's part of the conversation. Again, our technical team works with them much more on that than I do, right on the backside with the redundancy from the electricity standpoint. But yeah, absolutely, and that's part of that cost benefit analysis of, hey, we, barring something, if the grid goes out, you're not working either, right? So you can't, maybe we aren't, but if we aren't, you aren't, and vice versa. If you're not, we're not, right? We might be able to, and to be honest, from a redundancy perspective, that's typically why we have a diesel tractor on site. Even if it doesn't get used, we still service it and keep it. In the event something does happen unforeseen, we do still have a tractor on site that can be used. And if there's a long period of time, then we would just bring in a diesel and we would just keep going.
Before we done with the presentation, I've got 2 questions about that.
Sure.
Do you know in the tailoring? So every vehicle is tailored, and we talked about the battery size being one of those things that's tailored to the use case. Do you know if the charging power is also the one that you showed listed a 100 kW charger source, which is actually fairly low, which is low is good if it's good enough to do the job, because then your electricity costs at a commercial or industrial site are by total kWh, excuse me, not kWh, by total kW peak. So you're going to pay less if you have a smaller charger, even though you might draw the same amount of energy. Do you know if that's a factor in the cost modeling?
It is. And oftentimes what we'll see if in that use case, and the one here in Dallas and the one that I showed you, we have 2 at each one of those sites. If we can use up to 3 or 4 on a specific charger, you're really not going to charge them typically all at the same time anyway. But what we do is we would just add more chargers, right? And so we may not have one charger that's a much higher spec that's going to charge all 6 of them. We would just put in a couple different smaller chargers, maybe in different locations, right? And that's where that typically comes into play. We have one at 1 million square foot building, whatever. We put one on one side, we put one on the other side, in order to help from a charging perspective.
Well, and it's not just the access and the cost of the charger. When you mention putting them on different sides of a site, or if you can put some at the one that's a mile down the road as opposed to here, by placing them on different meters, your peak at each site is going to be lower. See, there's another part of the costs unlike all of us who pay for our energy at our homes, where it's by kilowatt hour. At these sites, they're paying by at least half of their bill. That whole delivery half of their bill is by peak power. And so, there's a loading factor that in the low 20%, half of your bill goes away. So if you can keep those chargers running more than 20% of the time, half of your bill is free. So I don't know if you've got all those sorts of things in your modeling, but it's all what's different about using an electric vehicle than a regular vehicle.
I would say if I know Chris, Chris does. I don't know that to be true in terms of how that model is put together, but if I know Chris, it's probably a factor. I will. I'll ask him. Yeah. No, I will.
The place that working with solar might help the peak, reduce the peaks during the day when maybe there's maximum usage.
Sure.
Okay.
Let me see. This is probably a good time if you want to talk labor. We can stop there. So we're.
Well, I love that part of your presentation is on labor's experience with the product. And when you were talking about lots of drivers aging out, so I'm thinking about a couple of people that we trained through we closed a nonprofit after 9.5 years, but it was solar installation training as pathway to living wage work for low income people. And one of the young men he's a CDL driver. If there is a way to point any of those folks to work, because what I can tell you about those young people is they are very interested in doing good for the environment. And then we have another young woman we trained from South Oak Cliff High School that she's worked at the solar manufacturers now on the line. Several of our people also went to work in the solar manufacturing plants. And she's interested in becoming a diesel mechanic. And I would love to
steer her.
Right. If there is an opportunity, because as a very young person, she's 19 or 20 now, she's kind of the main breadwinner for her large family of siblings. And I'm guessing that this is a specialized kind of new up and coming thing that could benefit these young people their whole lives. The other thing is, if MW were interested, we were also Dallas ISD Career Technology Education industry partners. it might be an excellent thing for MW Logistics to become, because then you can not only introduce the technology and the product to students who are, I mean, they're electrical, HVAC, I mean, if you can guide these kids to something they can do right outside of high school, helps everybody.
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk with you about that.
Yeah, absolutely. We can talk more offline, but I will say, we have two different intern programs. We have a collegiate intern program. We do a lot with University of North Texas, and then we also have a high school intern program. And so we can certainly talk offline about that. But what we see oftentimes, and the reason why we're passionate as an organization about these internship programs and the introduction of logistics and supply chain, and more importantly, transportation into these young people, is because those supply chain programs at these universities really focus on supply chain. They don't focus on transportation, right? They focus on how does a product, and they usually do the same, what is it, the beer, the manufacturing or the production of beer. It's the same program that pretty much everyone does that comes out. They come to us, we're on the transport side, right? So as an intermediary, we're not singularly tied to one mode of transportation. It's not train, it's not truck, it's not air, it's not, ship, it's not diesel, it's not, so we as an organization take a lot of pride in that. And what we do at the end of our program is we have a customer here, a very trusted, longstanding customer, really two different customers that we take and have those students tour those facilities. And then they go back to their supply chain programs whenever they're done with us, and they kind of get to see the full gamut, right? Okay, so we've seen how the product is manufactured. We've seen the supply chain side of it and all of the intricacies of the supply chain from that perspective. Now they get to go see how the product is moved and put on a shelf. And they go back with a different understanding of how the supply chain works. And so absolutely would love to have some conversations with you offline about it and see what we can do there, because it's anytime we can introduce, of course, we're passionate. We're crazy people being in trucking and transportation, but we're passionate about it. Otherwise we wouldn't do it. Heavy emphasis on the crazy. But it's, again, there aren't a lot of people that are signing up to be truck drivers. So if there's other avenues that we can get people interested in job placement and creating professionals in the space, we're certainly happy to do.
A related question. So there's the driver side of it and there's the mechanic side of it, but you also had your picture and this, I now have a question in my head back to the analogy you made that at the edge of the building, the company that's getting your services is responsible for everything that happens inside of the building, and you're taking care of what's outside the building. But those control stations that you showed, which are saying, oh, it is now time to move truck 1, 2, 3, 4 to lot 7. That's driven by both sides of that equation. And so is the service, the intelligence on that scheduling part of the service that your company provides, or is that their operations managers?
Can be both. We have a technology, a yard management system that we can provide to the client if they don't have one. And a lot of times, again, as I mentioned earlier, we're typically slow to change and adapt and move to different technologies. A lot of these facilities, you'd be interested to find out still operate with pen and paper, right? So having the physical, tangible data in order to show the metrics of the improved cycle times isn't there if everything has to be written down. Well, we have a system and a software platform that we can go and introduce and put in and install into one of these organizations where the digital footprint is there. They now can take some of that, what's the best way to put it? Some of the data entry type tasks, and they can go use those folks' skill set in a different area, right? That's maybe a more skilled labor role and transition them out of a data entry or, hey, I've got to go fill out this wave sheet. Wave sheet's just another fancy term of I've got 4 phases in a day broken up by, whatever their shifts are. Hey, Matt, you need to go move these 10 trailers between 9 and 10 a.m. You need to go move these few trailers between 10 and 11 a.m., right? Somebody has to put all that together. Well, inside the system, All you have to do is just essentially click a button and say, hey, I want to move this trailer, move this trailer. That takes a fraction of the time. Now I see it digitally, right? My driver sees it digitally. Now he goes and executes it. He doesn't have a radio, right? If there's a language barrier challenge there, that's completely gone away, right? Now he goes and he handles his business. And now that dock coordinator can go check on the backside to just check progress and make sure that those trailers get loaded. And typically you see the improved cycle time. So that trailer gets to the door faster. That product gets out faster than what it was getting to the door or getting out. And so it's a downstream effect. But yes, to answer your question, we have to work with it, right? We have an entire tech team that goes and trains them. If they use our system, oftentimes, if they're not doing it manually, they may have a fraction of a system where, and this is the other part of it, sometimes it's 50%, some in the system and 50% out of the system. Still doesn't, not doing anyone any good if only 50% of the tasks or 50% of the work is in the business. So there's some culture training and some different things that we have to do as an organization to help facilitate a lot of this digitization as well.
But this isn't, it sounds like this is a process that should be highly automated. This is not like a career that you're going to look for. I mean, from a dock operations perspective, yes, but even with your software, you don't have like a lot of people probably doing that job for it compared to the drivers.
No, in terms of the entry piece of it, no, but that, the development of the software, as you know, that's where a lot of that comes into play. And because we kind of have the baseline version of it, but again, every site and every use case is different. So the customization to that has to take place on the backside. So from a development perspective.
Now, have you ever looked at, and maybe you've looked at it, but I don't know how hot your clients would be on it. There are, for example, companies that do service agreements to run utility companies' batteries remotely. In other words, there is like one command and control center for a number of physical locations. Do you know is there anything like that in the transportation world where, your person running your yard ops isn't physically present?
So in terms of the yard management piece, I'm not aware of any. But what I will say is I do have a client who runs autonomous vehicles inside the warehouse, autonomous forklifts. And they have two different facilities where it's the same autonomous forklifts. And they have a command center that somebody sits in there with a joystick and runs both facilities. Yep.
One interesting use of these vehicles with these big batteries in them is energy in the vehicle to the grid or to some load. Are any of these set up so they can provide output power to help in case of a power outage or emergency?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
You might ask that to see if any of them are configured, because there's an interest, for instance, in school buses.
Sure.
When the power goes out, for them to be used for emergency power. These vehicles could be too.
Sure.
Not just for that organization, but for the community in some cases, if there's a big power failure.
No, great question. I think we kind of talked about using your EV as like a generator for the house. Yeah, great question. I don't know, but I'll find out.
The terminology for this is typically V2L or V2G. That's vehicle to load or vehicle to grid.
Okay. I'll certainly find out and I'll report back on that. That's a great question.
Sure.
Since they're a 24-hour-a-day operation, I wouldn't think they would use that. Like, but as an emergency, it would be useful.
Right. And it may help the warehouse. For instance, if there was a main power failure, if you could at least keep the computers going and some lights going on in the warehouse on the few days. It's not that we never have it. It's just every few years we have one of those storms come through.
Well, and what comes to mind is the dock mechanisms, right? The dock plates, because a lot of that and the locks that are underneath that hold the trailer to the dock is all done, it's done through electricity, right? They click the button and it releases the brake called dock lock, right? But it comes up, there's what's called an ICC bumper at the bottom of the trailer. It comes up, hooks onto that, attaches it, holds it steady at the door. So whenever they load it, then a hydraulic dock plate goes from the dock to the back of the trailer. Well, there's a power outage and that can't finish whatever you're deploying it or pulling it back. If it can't finish,
So the trailers,
if you can, it's
stuck.
Yeah, it's absolutely stuck. And a lot of
Right.
times the dock doors, most of them, it's just like a garage door, right? It's electric, right? But then you kind of flip the switch and you can manually do it. But really
Sure.
more so the lock and then the dock plate. That's a great question. No, I'll certainly take that.
Might be a possibility.
Sure.
You need to be able to use the tub to unlock everything.
Sure. That'd be fantastic. No, that's a great, it's not
Okay.
even something again, if I know Chris, he knows the answer.
Do we have any questions online? If so, you can unmute yourself. And are there any questions here in the room? I think we've just about gotten through all our questions, Matt.
I'll leave my information up here. It's been fantastic. Thank you for bringing me out and having me share this. We've seen a lot of success with it. We're really proud about what we've been able to do and kind of separate ourselves in the market when there's so much competition, right? The barrier to entry to be a third-party logistics provider is very low. If you have a computer, you can dang become a broker, right? So what we do in terms of an integrated logistics provider separates ourselves. So we know we have to be cost competitive. Everybody has to be cost competitive. We're not always going to be the cheapest. We don't have to be competitive, right? But you guys heard me say the few companies, and there's thousands, but the JB Hunts, the Swifts, the Snyders, right? The BNSFs, the DHLs, the FedExes, the UPS, the Walmarts, right? A lot of these guys, the Amazons, they have their own private fleets, but they also use their private fleets in the public sector as what's called a backhaul, right? And so they come and they can really capture and give a client super, super low rates because they have to get back to home base. So if they go Dallas to Chicago and they need to get back to Dallas, that Chicago to Dallas rate can be well below market. Like I can't compete with that, right? There's no way, right? But how can we separate ourselves? What additional value can we bring in the marketplace? And we've been able to do that with the electric vehicles. We're helping clients, one, be more, financially and fiscally responsible. We're helping them with their CO2 abatement. And we're increasing their efficiencies and their operations at their facilities, right? So if we can continue down that trend and continue to execute at a high level like we have, then the sky's the limit. We're really excited about it.
Okay, I saw one question that somebody typed in earlier. Sure. How long have you been putting EVs out there?
So we have been doing it a little over 2 years, and our partner and our OEM has been doing it for about 8.
Well, very good. Well, I guess that's it. Thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you so much.
And if Randy doesn't have anything else, we'll go ahead and close the meeting.
Just a reminder, we would love to find our new events coordinator. So you got a week to get on that slate.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Great.
Yes.
No, it was great. I appreciate it.